Hi everybody, welcome to the Tasmanian Refugee Legal Service podcast. Today we're doing an episode on the Family Violence Migration Service. So we have Taya with us today, who's the senior lawyer in this area, and my name's Jarin. I'm the paralegal. We might just start off with an acknowledgement of country. So we would first like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're gathering on today. For Taya and I, that's the Muwinina people of Nipaluna, Hobart. And we would like to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. All right. Do you want to say hi, Taya?
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
All right. So we're going to talk a bit about the Family Violence Migration Service. So Taya, do you want to give us a little bit of an overview about what this service is, when it was established and why?
Sure. So the Family Violence Migration Service is a specialist sort of branch within Tasmanian Refugee Legal Service. And that was originally launched in around March 2021, and that was with a 12-month funding grant from the Tasmanian Community Fund. So we applied for that funding with the idea to set up a specialist service to cater for temporary visa holders who are experiencing family violence, because the Tasmanian Refugee Legal Service prior to that had only represented people who were asylum seekers, refugees or humanitarian entrants, and so we didn't provide broader migration advice, and other community legal centres weren't able to provide migration advice either. So there was a real service gap in Tasmania for any temporary visa holder experiencing family violence, and so we sought out the community funding to set up the Family Violence Migration Service, which has now received state funding and has extended the service.
And it's grown significantly since its conception. And so can you talk a little bit about sort of how many cases you're doing and like sort of the breadth of the work that you're doing within that service?
Yeah, so it has grown quite a lot. When we first launched the service, we had an initial kind of inundation of referrals, and I think it really showed the existing gap that was there. In terms of number of clients, I guess we have an ongoing sort of file register for clients that have long-term sort of legal representation for, and that ranges between, that representation, would range between sort of 12 months to resolve their matter, sometimes 2 years, sometimes even 3 years. And those clients, we'll set up a full file for them and offer that ongoing representation. Those files started back in March 2021 and are ongoing through till now. We also have quite a lot of one-off kind of advices. So we do a lot of sort of preliminary advice on any migration matter, and we might get between 1 to 3 or 4 inquiries each week around migration initial advice matters.
Awesome. And who's eligible for this service? So who can sort of seek out this service if they feel they need it?
So the service is, the general eligibility is any temporary visa holder in Tasmania who's experienced family violence. So it's not a gendered service, although we do recognise that family violence is a gendered issue. So the majority of those seeking assistance from the service are women, but it's not a gendered service at all. And any temporary visa holder, doesn't matter what class of visa it is. You don't need to have left the relationship to seek advice or assistance, and you can get that on the phone, in person, whatever is convenient for the client, really.
And that's quite a common misconception, isn't it? That you have to have left the relationship, or the relationship has to have ended, or if the relationship does end, that they won't be valid for another visa.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that our service really wants to sort of get the information out into community around, the idea that people are often trapped in, either feel or are actually trapped in violent relationships because their visa status is basically being held over them as a tool to keep them trapped in that relationship. And so we're hoping to be able to equip people with the information and provide that legal advice around the pathways that might be available to them to enable them to leave those violent relationships.
And what are some other misconceptions that people have around family violence? So can you sort of talk us through some of the misnomers about family violence?
Yeah, so I think in general, we've come from a fairly narrow view of family violence traditionally being around physical harm, and the definition of family violence in the migration regulations is far broader than that. So the definition under the regulations is any conduct towards an individual, whether it's actual or threatened, that causes them to be reasonably fearful or apprehensive for their well-being or safety. So that's obviously a very broad definition. That includes threats, it includes emotional abuse, it includes financial abuse, it includes sexual violence, very, very broad kind of, course of conduct type behaviours, so coercive control and those kind of behaviours. So that's all captured within that definition, and that's certainly something that we've seen a lot of the time. People feeling that their experiences of family violence might not be enough if there's not physical violence. So that's definitely a strong misconception that's out there, yeah.
And do you think that that sort of broader definition has translated to sort of the systems that are processing these claims, or are you still seeing quite a narrow interpretation of family violence within those systems?
It's an interesting one. I think even though that's the definition in the migration regulations, certainly when we're going through that evidence gathering process with clients, it can be the case that clients themselves are concerned that they don't have enough evidence if they don't have evidence of physical violence. The way that the department assesses family violence evidence, though, according to their policy guidelines, there's no hierarchy in terms of the types of violence, and certainly we present quite strong legal arguments around if there's non-physical forms of violence, why that still satisfies the definition in the regulations.
Yeah. So could you talk us through some of the... So there's two primary areas that you work in with regard to someone that's experienced family violence. There's the protection claim and the Div 1.5. Could you talk us through a little bit of those?
Yeah, so generally speaking, our service works in those two broad areas. So we call them partner visa cases, and non-partner visa cases is an easy way to distinguish between them. So we provide assistance to, like I said, any temporary visa holder, but a lot of the time the type of visa that someone might have applied for is a partner visa. So that's where the visa applicant is applying for a visa for an Australian visa on the basis that they're in a relationship with an Australian citizen or permanent resident. And so their eligibility to be granted that visa is contingent on them being in that relationship. So through a lot of advocacy and concerns around people staying in violent relationships because of their visa status, there was amendment to the migration regulations called Division 1.5, and that's special provisions for family violence. And that basically allows a person who has applied for a partner visa that hasn't been granted the permanent partner visa to be granted that permanent partner visa, even though their relationship has broken down, if they prove they've experienced family violence. So the process of proving family violence is quite a technical and complex legal process, and so it requires a lot of supporting material, a lot of evidence, and it can be quite a complicated pathway for someone to navigate. So that's what we assist those clients in preparing all of that evidence and presenting their claim essentially to the Department of Home Affairs. If that's accepted, then they can be granted their permanent visa. So the partner visa pathway is fairly established in migration law. For those applicants who are on other temporary visas, so they might be on a student visa, they might be a secondary visa holder, so a dependent on, say, their partner's skilled visa, there's no clear pathway like that. So those provisions don't apply in that situation. So we would then meet with the client and work out whether or not there might be any other visa pathway available for them. So whether that's a further visa in their own right as a skilled migrant, or in some situations, because of their country of origin and because of the circumstances around them having experienced family violence here and their relationship breaking down, they might then face a risk of harm if they were forced to return to their country of origin. That might be harm from their former partner's family, from their own family, or from the state. And they then may have a claim for a protection visa onshore here in Australia, in which case we would assist with that process too. So they're the kind of two main areas that we work in.
Yeah, great. And so what are some of your reflections on your work in this area? Because you've been in this area for a little while now. Sort of what are some of the great experiences that you've had, and then some of the more challenging ones?
That's a good question. I think working in this area is a really rewarding space to work in. There are obviously a lot of challenges around working with clients who have experienced family violence and I guess holding space with those disclosures and operating in a way that is trauma informed and doesn't re-traumatise clients going through this process, because often the legal system can be a really re-traumatising experience and needing to relive some of those. So there's a lot of challenges with that, but it is very rewarding to be able to assist a client navigate that pathway where they've thought or have been told by their partner potentially that they have no options, that they're going to be deported or that there's no future for them here, or they might be separated from their children, to then navigate a pathway through to permanent residency for them. And so, seeing the difference that makes in someone's life to then be able to have live a life free from that violence here in Australia is really rewarding.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's such an important service in the community. Can you talk a little bit more about why the FVMS is so important within this community, within Tasmania in particular, and sort of, what it offers to the community that maybe other services don't quite cover?
Yeah, so I think because of the complexity of migration law, having assistance in navigating a migration pathway is really essential for temporary visa holders, and particularly when you're experiencing family violence and you might have other legal challenges in your life, it leaves someone particularly vulnerable. And so having the support of a service to navigate what is an incredibly complex migration system, I think is really, really valuable. And we work really closely with other legal services. For example, we have a partnership with Women's Legal Service where we offer combined representation on family law matters as well as migration law matters. And we also work with other services like Red Cross to get financial assistance. And we work really closely with housing services and try and provide that kind of holistic and wraparound support for that client so that they have assistance from all the different services that they need and that their migration and non-migration needs are met as well. So I think we're really fortunate in Tasmania to have quite a small network of those services where we can have warm referrals and facilitate all of that to sort of, wrap around the client basically. And I think that really enables the client to navigate that pathway in a way that's safe for them and that's also empowering for them.
And that sort of integrated process is so important to ensure that clients aren't being re-traumatised and facing those difficulties. So in terms of reaching out to the FVMS, if anyone wants to reach out, you can reach us at our email, fvms@trls.org.au. You can also drop by the TRLS office at 319 Liverpool Street or call the office anytime if you need assistance. Great. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, Jarin.